Here's a simple question for you. Do you want to be happy? Yes or no? I'm gonna assume the answer was yes. So what do you think is the main cause of happiness? On average. I know there are many reasons for people to find happiness in their lives, but on average, what brings the most joy to people? Well, research shows that it's meaningful relationships and connections. Well, who would have guessed? This life is a multiplayer game. And one of the most powerful things a human can use to build strong, sincere, and meaningful connections or bonds with others is empathy. There are many ways and many tools towards true happiness, and eventually I want to create a concise list of videos categorizing some of them. But in this one, I wanted to kick it off with what I think is the most powerful one: empathy. So let's see, what is empathy? Can you learn empathy? Are there any downsides to it? And why does it matter so much? Let's kick it off. There are three distinct yet similar feelings that I always seem to mix up: empathy, sympathy, and compassion. Empathy is an ability to understand what another person is experiencing and feeling. It also might simply be seeing another's point of view as you would see your own. It's like stepping into another person's shoes. Our hearts break if our loved one is in pain, and as life is always more complex, empathy branches off to smaller components which themselves can also be divided, but we don't need to go into them. Sympathy means you understand what the other person is feeling, even without feeling it yourself. It is extremely useful in the medical profession, where doctors and nurses care for the sick and dying, but can maintain a certain level of distance. Otherwise, you would burn out and cannot provide the further service. Now, compassion means you feel empathy and sympathy, but you feel the need to take action to ease the suffering of others, like Mother Teresa. Well, I guess I can consider myself empathetic. It's one of the reasons I chose to make a video about it. Over the years, I've always seemed to pick up others' subtle emotional cues almost instantly and notice a change in them, which then has prompted me to approach them and to interact with them. This has led me to create many relationships and friendships over the years. Now, deep and meaningful relationships take much more time to nurture and hold than just approaching somebody. But empathy provides a good starting point. You can feel other people's joy, sadness, pain even. What about you? Do you notice other people's feelings? Let me know. And hey, if you have any feelings about this video, you can tap these buttons slightly. Thank you. But the latest example I had of empathy was anger, actually. I read Stephen King's massive horror novel, It, where there's a character named Beverly, and she has been in an abusive relationship for over 4 years with her husband Tom, and Tom beats her and does bad things to her all the time. But it escalates to extreme on the night when she decides to leave him to help her friends, and that brings out the monster in Tom. The way it was written was so real, and as growing up, I've seen plenty of times when grown-ups fight, and I think that no self-respecting man should ever hit a woman. So in that chapter of the book, I felt physical anger, wanting to go to help. Yet, you can only watch as the story unfolds, leaving you with this empathetic distress. But I believe that's what the author was aiming for. Thanks, Stephen. But let's see why do you need empathy. True, there can be some downsides having empathy and strong feelings. There are some professions out there where you need to set your strong emotions aside in order to be effective at your job. Medical profession was one, as where patients around you sometimes die, and if you cry yourself into a wreck every time that happens, you will soon quit. Rescue worker needs to hold a clear head during a critical time-sensitive mission. You can't panic or get freaked out when you have to choose between a red wire and a blue wire. A CEO needs to make logic-based decisions in order to keep his company afloat and provide work for thousands of people. A detective needs to look at evidence with logic and hard facts when interrogating a suspect. Of course, I believe that a lot of people who started work in these professions are empathetic and sympathetic and compassionate. That's why they started out. but in order to be effective and do their job, they need to balance out those emotions pretty heavily. Maybe businessmen can be excluded because emotions rule over cold and hard logic and can be a burden sometimes. You don't need empathy to be successful. There are many stories about cold, calculative sociopaths. But overall, empathy is a very, very, very good thing. And here's why. Empathy is being concerned about the person and not on their output. You can be a better manager, a better boss. Teamwork needs empathy. It builds trust. In business, you must empathize with your customers and their needs. And you also have to empathize with your workers who have to deal with these customers and their needs. Big companies start to struggle when they shift their focus away from the workers. When companies prioritize the needs of the shareholders over the needs of their workers. It's like a football coach prioritizing the needs of the fans over the needs of their players. It's when your company's backbone starts to rot and wither. Mercedes-Benz gives their workers a car so they could better empathize with their customers.
A 12th day of demonstrations in dozens of cities, demands for justice and change. Tens of thousands of people packing streets and parks in New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Denver. Thousands turning out for the March for Justice in Seattle, including hundreds of healthcare workers calling racism a public health emergency.
Empathy allows us to keep an open mind and challenge prejudice, racism, unjust actions, and find commonality with others. Because we have much more in common with each other than we have differences. At the end of the day, it's not about the color of our skin, but whether you're a good and kind person or not. We are all the same, but with just a bit of different flavor. And a good rule of success is get along with others. Without empathy, we start to label people outside our circle as others, problems, or the enemy. And that is tiresome and a bad place to spend your life. It's your own little hell. If you have a depressed friend, then empathy helps as well. Not sympathy or compassion, you don't need to take action, but just be there. It's like a child's teddy bear gets broken down and dad just goes out and brings a new one to him and voila, problem solved. No, it's not the same. It's not the same teddy bear. People always don't need help. They just need somebody who's there and feels what they feel and just listens. Without empathy, we got the possibility to grow and move forward. You can teach others, mentor, coach, especially your children. Empathy is very important when you want to raise an intelligent, self-sufficient, socially interactive and happy children. Your child needs tons of empathy from you in order for her or his brain development. It will affect their moral and ethical compass and raise their IQ. So if you want smart, well-behaved, successful children, use empathy. But not too much. Remember, life is about balance and too much empathy can be considered smothering. No one likes that. Or you'll run the risk of spoiling them, which can be even worse. Empathy makes happy children, stronger communities, and a better world. In conclusion, if you want to have a fulfilled life, then empathy is great. Now, empathy is intuitive, but it can be developed intellectually. One half of our empathy comes from being empathized with, and other half is genetic. It all starts when we are babies. The amount of exposure to empathy we get plays a huge role. Toddlers can already present the ability to offer help to others or come to them if they're sad. It also comes down to genetics as well. People with Down syndrome, unfortunately, do not possess the ability to pick up others' emotions, and that's one of the reasons they are having a really hard time in life. Some children are more empathetic than others. Some have to learn it. I love a story about a boy who always kept leaving his toys around the floor, around everywhere. But when he visited his blind grandmother, he soon learned that leaving toys around the floor could really hurt her. And he really loved her, so he felt empathetic enough to correct his bad behavior, and he started picking up his toys. And later on, it was also described that he started telling his grandmother stories what he saw from TV, so his grandmother could also enjoy what's going on around in the world, which is super cute. If you did not have loving parents who taught you about emotions, then it's not too late either. Here's what you do. First, become aware of your own feelings, constantly. In my first video, I talked about the spectrum of life and where do you fall on that spectrum. Are you stressed, depressed, or sad? Then you're moving towards one end of the spectrum. Now, don't try to hide these feelings. Don't try to drown them with drugs or games. Inspect them and understand that every feeling has an opposite side of the coin as well. And only then, when you have taken time to get to know yourself and your feelings and let them breathe and come out a bit, only then start noticing other people and their feelings. Look at their postures, their expressions, how they move, slow or fast. Are they angry, sad, happy? Notice these feelings, just notice them. Listen to others, really listen to others when you interact with them. Analyze what they're telling you, see how they would have gotten to this point in their lives that they're at right now, and try to put yourself into their shoes. It takes a bit of focus and effort, but you must not let yourself be distracted. It's really hard to pay attention what's going around you when you're always constantly in your phone. Learn to see the world around you. Walk in other people's shoes for a bit, and I guarantee you that your quality, your life quality and your happiness level will rise tremendously. We are all connected with feelings and emotions every day, just tangled in them. And if we learn to see them and not push them away or hide them or make them taboo, then that's the stuff of life. Okie dokie, I hope you learned something. And again, I do believe that empathy is a very important skill in order to enjoy a fulfilled, meaningful life full of good feelings. It's a link between yourself and others. If you agree with me, let me know. If you disagree with me, also let me know. And please consider subscribing, because there are tons of videos coming out that explore this chaos of life. And I hope to see you in the next one. Keep exploring, keep learning, and ciao.